Salute everybody. Good morning here from Bristol, Rhode Island, man. You got Bruce Goes hanging out with you on the bay over here, and you know I've done a few lives now, and I've mostly okay. Here we are, man. I've mostly spoken on boxing, which is my passion. But but today we're going to talk about a little jazz here, man. We're going to talk about one of my favorites in the jazz world, man. A trumpet player by the name of Miles Davis, man. Miles Davis he is jazz, man. Miles Dewey Davis, May 26th, 1926, and he passed away September 28th, 1991. I'm going to do a couple of lung busters here to get myself ready for this show. If you bear with me for a few minutes, just kind of get a few people in here. Dimitar, my brother, how are you? Nordic Warrior, good to see you here, bro. Oh no, my lighter. Oh, it's just about dead. I have to get my producer to give me a little lighter here, man. Thank you. Kwee, my love, salute. Glad to have you in here. Norris of Loxley, pleased to have you in here. Let's get myself ready to talk about Miles Davis, one of my all-time favorite jazz musicians. One more. Okay, man. Let them kick in, and let's talk about my man Miles Davis, man. Miles Dewey Davis. Probably. The biggest jazz musician. I'm gonna have to say the biggest jazz musician. Big Duke 24, my brother. Salute out there. Tim Moosey, salute. Yeah, Miles Davis, man. He's the king of jazz. Miles Davis. When I first got into jazz, I started listening to jazz. I fell in love with it basically in 1974. I went to a Chick Corea concert. I don't know if I can play this real soft in the background, if it'll work. I guess it will. Ashley's Corner. Salute, love. Glad to have you in here, man. But anyway, man, I went to see I was always a rock and roll, hard rock man. I listened to all kind. I used to buy albums. That was my thing. I was like, Led Zeppelin, B.B. King, Earth, Wind and Fire, the blues. Man, I was into everything. I was into the Grateful Dead. I was into, the Southern California rock, the Eagles, all kind of rock. Jimi Hendrix blew me away. I used to go to concerts. That was my entertainment. But then a friend of mine, he said, "Why don't you come to me to this Chick Corea concert, Return to Forever?" And I used to listen to his music, and it was like always just weird, very bizarre, all kind of different patterns, and I just couldn't keep with the beat, man. I was a 4/4, 16 bar kind of a cat. And anyway, man, I went to this concert. It was Chick Corea and Return to Forever, and it was of course it was Chick Corea on piano, the late Chick Corea. A guy named Stanley Clark on the bass, Al Di Meola on the guitar, and Lenny White on the drums. And all these guys they have their roots with Miles Davis too. That's something I found out later. But anyway, man, I was blown away at this concert. It looked like the guitar player looked like he was just shooting an Uzi in there. He was so fast, so technically accurate. I was seeing things where I had seen guitar players. I am a guitar player. And bro, man, I saw Al Di Meola, and it was a new experience to me. I thought I'd seen fast guitar players. I'd seen Johnny Winter and B.B. King, blues players, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Alvin Lee. Man, I thought I'd seen the fastest. And I saw Al Di Meola with those fingers, man. And everybody in the band, it was like the Chick Corea. He had an acoustic piano. He had a Moog synthesizer. He had several different keyboards on there. And man, it blew my mind how much talent there was. And this is rock. This is loud blasting. This is rock and roll music. This was a great time, bro. This was a great concert. And I walked out of that concert and I just said, man, have I failed at being a musician? Um, it just opened new doors to me. And those four musicians, I started listening to them. We had back then it was radio, man. There were all night jazz stations, and in fact, I eventually became an all night jazz DJ. I felt I was so immersed in the music, but man, they all had a common denominator. They all led back to Miles Davis. And I heard the first time I heard Miles Davis, it was your classic jazz. It was the trumpet, the bass, the tenor sax, the piano, and the drums. And I dug it, but I was still more into that rock stuff. I was still more into the electric jazz. But as I started branching my jazz artists out, man, they all came back to Miles Davis. So I started to listen to a little more Miles. And Miles, man, Miles Davis, he started playing in the 40s. I mean, I have an album here. This is Miles Davis, Jerry Mulligan, Ali Kantz, John Lewis, and Max Roach. Miles Davis tuba band, and this was recorded in France back in the late 40s, 1948. And man, that to me that was a little too much old time jazz. Like I said, I was into the the fusion stuff, the electric stuff, the Chick Coreas, the John Mclaughlin, Mahavishnu orchestras, Billy Cobham, things like that. The just the loud and the fast stuff. My life was hectic. Jazz was hectic. It fit in so perfectly, man. LeVar Cooper, my brother, man. So great to see you on here, man. I haven't seen you. I haven't seen you on one of my lives, man. It's good. It's great to see you. In fact, this microphone here was donated to me by my brother LeVar Cooper. If it wasn't for him, I'd have just headphones on and I'd sound like a crackling paper bag up here, man. So shout out to my brother LeVar Cooper, man. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing this. And I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse, but for me right now, that's a blessing, man. I thank God I have something to do like this, and I thank God I got a couple of people that come on and dig it with me, man. It's interesting. I'd probably do this by myself if I had to, but being out here and having several people come on here listening to it with me, and maybe we're gonna contribute to it a little bit, man. Because I don't know about you cats, but jazz to me, jazz was the end all be all, bro. Carlos Mendoza, salute, bro. Like I was saying before, after that first concert, I must have had, I'm gonna say, close to 2,000 record albums that I had. I think the first album I bought way back in the day was Jimi Hendrix Experience. And I had Rolling Stones, and I had Beatles, and I had Woodstock. I had just like I said, man, over 1,000, maybe 1,500. But and at the time I was a traveler, bro. I was moving around from apartment to apartment, relationship to relationship. But I had a Foot Locker full of albums. I had my guitar, and I had my clothes, and I really didn't set roots up to, to later on in life, but the constant in my life was music, man. It was jazz. Well, after I saw Chick Corea and Return to Forever, it was jazz. Before that, it was music was my life, man. I'd probably be dead without music. Music is, I don't know, bro. But anyway, man, once I saw my first jazz concert, my mind was blown. I started checking out Miles Davis, and the first album I bought, the first album that I picked up was called In a Silent Way, and it's only there's only basically 2 songs on the album, but this album featured I'm gonna read this lineup for you here, man. It featured Miles Davis, and it featured Chick Corea, the cat that I fell in love with too originally. And I saw Wayne Shorter, man. Wayne Shorter from Weather Report. That was like, wow, this is like awesome stuff here. Herbie Hancock on piano. I don't know if any of you cats, dug Herbie Hancock, but Herbie Hancock, man, he goes way back. He started his career back in the 60s playing with Miles Davis, Dave Harlan on bass, Joseph Zawinul. He had three keyboardists on this album. He had Herbie Hancock. He had Chick Corea, and he had Joe Zawinul. And then of course John McLaughlin, the guitar player who just showed me how electric guitar is like damn. I mean, beyond the speed of sound, beyond the speed of sight, just so fast and so accurate. And then the drummer that he had, Miles Davis had this drummer Tony Williams, man. He had him. He had the guy when he was 18 years old, and Tony Williams was a monster. I regret that I didn't see Tony Williams. He played at a club in Newport back in I'm going to say back in the late 80s, maybe 87 or 88 or so. And I just couldn't go. I can kick myself in the ass now because Tony Williams, Miles drummer back in that Miles had this quartet. It was called the Classic Quartet, and it featured it was the 1960s standards for jazz. It was Miles Davis, and he had Herbie Hancock on piano. He had Ron Carter on bass, and another story right there. He had Wayne Shorter on saxophone and Tony Williams on drums. 18-year-old Tony Williams touring with Miles Davis throughout the world. And Miles Davis, you know, man, look, I think I don't know if I mentioned it before, but the man has 61 studio albums. He's got 46 collaborations that he plays on albums with. He's got 39, count that, 39 live albums. And Miles goes through genders. He goes through periods where he started with the acoustic, you know, like I was showing you the tuba band back when he was playing with Jerry Mulligan. See, Miles played with Charlie Parker. That was the first time I heard Miles Davis. And Charlie Parker was the founder of bop. He took jazz from the ballrooms, the big bands, and created these quartets and these quintets where, you know, these guys cooked. I mean, nobody knew what they were doing. This was, and they started calling it bop because everybody was bopping their heads, man. You know, from the big band swing days with people dancing on the ballroom floor, the musicians in there, and exclusively, especially Charlie Parker, he wanted to go in a different direction, and he started playing bop. It was an awesome thing. He had guys like Max Roach who were with him, a drummer, a firecracker of a drummer. There were, I mean, all different musicians played with Charlie Parker, with Bud Powell, Richie Powell. There were so many of them. He had Dizzy Gillespie, but anyway, Charlie Parker was the sax player. He was the ultimate sax player. I mean, he was, you know, Charlie Bird Parker. He only lived 35 years, but man, what an impression he made on all the jazz musicians. Unfortunately, Charlie Parker died of complications with heroin, and you know, the young cats, because Charlie Parker did it, they were going to do it. So it kind of was a big, you know, it was a tough time for jazz musicians. It was a dark light, so to speak. But anyway, man, Miles Davis, he started with Charlie Parker, and he formed his own bands. Jed Kiley, my brother, salute, the Nordic Warrior, man. Thanks for stopping in, bro. So Miles formed bands, and he was just a magnet. Miles, technically, maybe not the greatest trumpeter out there, but he got the best out of the musicians that he gathered together, man. It's an early one, man. This is the Tallest Trees album. This is Miles. One thing about his albums too, the covers are artworks, and I never kept them that clean or anything. But you know, I concentrated on preserving the albums. But anyway, I have so many of them. They just got stacked up. The corners got bent. But this album was recorded in 1954, 1955. Excuse me, my dog back there. That's the year I was born, 1954. And this is Miles Davis with Milt Jackson on the vibes. He had Thelonious Monk, another legend in jazz, man. If anybody's into jazz, man, check out Thelonious Monk. It blow your mind, man. The Don, thank you for coming in, brother. Salute to you, man. And he also had Percy Heath on bass and Kenny Clark on drums. A monster percussion force, a monster rhythm section, man. Um, just a fantastic period to be loving jazz, man. That's like I almost wish I was born 20 years earlier. I could have been bopping and clubbing with these cats back then. But man, Miles, just an incredibly progressive jazz musician who was never satisfied. See, Miles, he had the classic quartets, and then other musicians were following Miles' style. Salute my brother, Mr. Pads. I'm glad you came on here, bro. Mr. Pads, I know he loves his jazz. We talked to it many a time, and I told him I was going to do a jazz show. Man, I'm not the best at this. I've listened to other people do jazz shows, and I'm just a fan, man. I'm just like I love boxing, and I have a passion for jazz too. Boxing it consumes my life, but there are other things too, and there were other times in there, and jazz was just once I fell in love with jazz, man. Jazz was really like a drug. I put the headphones on, even the earbuds on this morning. I was listening to some Miles out there, and when I hear like a Wayne Shorter, when I hear one of those tenor sax solos, man, my mind is somewhere else. My mind just gets totally engulfed in the music. And I remember that about jazz. Sometimes you go to clubs and you see guys sitting down, just closing their eyes and just going with the music, and they're in another world, bro. Once you get there, jazz is like your drug. I mean, you can sit in a club for hours and listen to musicians play, and their solos they take you in different directions, and I mean it's an awesome thing. When I started to really appreciate jazz, I couldn't get enough of it. I was a pain in the ass, man. I would get up in the morning and I'd put jazz on at 6 o'clock, get ready for school. Like, hey, what are you doing? I'm just shutting that shit down, dude. I'm sorry. Back then we had headphones, and it was only a 10-foot cord at best. But anyway, man, I would play jazz. I bring girls home after a date, and the first thing I do is I throw some jazz on, because it just made the environment. It just created the whole atmosphere. One thing about jazz too. When I'm eating, I can't listen to jazz. It's weird. It disturbs me. I can do when I train, when I run, when I clean, when I cook, when I work. Music is always encompassing it. But when I eat, I can't get into jazz. It's a strange part of me. But anyway, bro, yeah, Mr. Paz, you're nothing, man. There's nothing like live jazz bands. And Miles Davis, I never got to see Miles Davis, man. When I was moving around from my base in Boston, Miles had his last tour, and he played at a club called the Jazz Workshop. 3 nights, they were all sold out. I just didn't have time. I was trying to get a job in Maine, and I was living in Boston. And it was just difficult. I could kick myself in the ass for it now that I never saw Miles. But and he was there with I think he had George Duke on piano. He had John Schofield. He had Darryl Jones, man. Darryl Jones, the bass player, who's the bass player for the Rolling Stones right now, man. I mean that's how broad that's how talented these musicians are, and they're sought out by everybody. And when playing Bitches Brew. I don't exactly know what I'm playing. It's funny because I get up in some station doing a Miles Davis special. So it's on in my background. It's on YouTube. I hope I don't get flagged for it, but it's just I'm gonna see what happens. I'm putting it on there, and it's Miles is the man, dude. I don't know if that's Bitches Brew, but Bitches Brew was the album. I have Bitches Brew right here somewhere, man. Yeah, live Miles Davis Bitches Brew. This was put out right after In a Silent Way. This was jazz fusion, man. This was an awesome album. The musicians on here are mind blowing. I mean, shit. The personnel. Of course, we got Miles Davis on trumpet. And we got Wayne Shorter on soprano sax, which, Wayne Shorter can play tenor sax and soprano sax. I'm sure he plays alto. I've never seen him play it, but I've seen Wayne Shorter several times. One of the best, man. Lenny White, the guy I saw with Chick Corea, Return to Forever. He's the drummer on here. Then you got Benny Maupin on bass clarinet. Benny played with Herbie Hancock. awesome bass clarinet, man. Chick Corea on electric piano. I mean, talk about how it all comes together over here. We got Jim Rowley on percussion. Jack DeJohnette, one of my favorite drummers, man. Jack DeJohnette on drums, man. I've seen Jack DeJohnette several times. He plays with everybody from Miles Davis to James Taylor. I mean, Jack DeJohnette is the one of the top drummers in the world to get. If you're putting out an album, you can get Jack DeJohnette to sit in with you. You're doing very well. Mr. Pads, John McLaughlin. Yeah, John McLaughlin's on this album too. John McLaughlin is probably to me, he's the best guitar player out there, man. You know, the first time I saw John McLaughlin in concert, man, I saw Jeff Beck was the opening act, and this is just when Jeff Beck started getting funky with the jazz. And John McLaughlin, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, was the main act. I mean, this was the original. This was Billy Cobham. This was Jan Hammer, John McLaughlin. I can't. Jerry Goodman on violin. I can't remember who the bass player was. But anyway, man, yeah, Mahavishnu, awesome show, man. With Jeff Beck, I was hoping they would jam at the end, but they didn't. But it was a great show. And anyway, John McLaughlin, he got his start with Miles Davis. Miles saw something in John McLaughlin, and man, they just fit in so well together. And then Larry Young also on electric piano, but Bitches Brew, yeah, that's a classic, man. That's been in here forever, man. You know, Miles he's such a contemporary too, and this is another album that I wanna put out. Well, actually, I'm gonna show this one first, man. This is the number one selling jazz album of all time, Miles Davis Kind of Blue. I mean, this was jazz in the 50s, man. This is, and it's still as fresh as it was today. And this features, you know, Miles Davis, of course. And then on alto sax, you got Julian Cannonball Adderley, bro. I mean, I can't. Then you got John Coltrane on tenor sax. You got Wynton Kelly on piano. Bill Evans also on piano. Paul Chambers on bass, and Jimmy Cobb on drums, bro. I mean, Miles always had the best in here. This is throughout the 50s. And, you know, and then he put together the Classic Quartet. You know, an album that I'm sure that's gonna touch our strings on all of us is the Jack Johnson album. You know, Miles Davis tribute to Jack Johnson. You know, Miles was a boxer. Miles loved his boxing, bro. La D, salute, man. Sister, peace to you. I'm so happy to see you here. But this Miles Davis and Jack Johnson, this is the this is a quartet that he put together. This was in the late 60s, I believe. It's tough because you doesn't put dates on here too often. You really have to scramble to see the dates. But on the Jack Johnson album, it's John McLaughlin, Herbie Hancock, Steve Grossman, an awesome sax player, another avant-garde sax player. If you're into jazz, man, check out Steve Grossman. Billy Cobham. Billy Cobham is the one, if not the fastest drummer, the strongest drummer. He's got arms on him like watermelons, man. He's a blur. It's like a cat sitting behind the traps with 4 arms, and yet he keeps a beat. I saw Billy Cobham band open up for George Benson in Providence back in I want to say 76. What a show, man. Another time they didn't jam together. They have many times, but they all come back to being disciples of Miles Davis over here. And then he had Michael Henderson on Fender bass. And this is another album. Miles had two songs on here. He had a song called Right Off, and he had a song called Yes Tomorrow. Miles put a little note on here too, and he put in here. I'm going to read this to you. It says that the rise of Jack Johnson to world heavyweight supremacy in 1908 was a signal for the white envy to erupt. Can you get that? And of course, we're being born in Black America. We all know how that goes. The day before Johnson defended his title against Jim Flynn in 1912, he received a note. It said, "Lie down tomorrow or we string you up." And it was signed by the Ku Klux Klan. Dig that. Johnson portrayed freedom. It rang just as loud as the bell proclaiming him champion. He was a fast-living man. He liked women, lots of them, and most of them white. He had flashy cars. That's right, big cars, the big fast ones. He smoked cigars. He drank only the best champagne and prized a 7-foot bass fiddle on which he proudly thumped jazz. His flamboyancy was more than obvious, and no doubt, mighty what he felt. No black man should have this, but he did, and he flaunted it. And that wasn't a smile chugging along implication on his broad grin that seemed to always be on his face. But what it was Jack Johnson was a living color nightmare for the anti-Johnson Americans who couldn't get ready for this truly sophisticated attitude. And the more they hated him, the more money he made, and the more women he got, and the more wine he drank. Hate the opposite of love, and both gained momentum. He won all his fights when he wanted and how he wanted, including the Great White Hope Jim Jeffries on July 4th, 1910. On July 5th, they got on it with riots. That's right, man. Fire, at least 10 people dead. And the latter, 1911 congressional law banning fight films from interstate commerce. So, Jack Johnson was huge, and Miles Davis knowed that too. He ended this with, after his high society white wife committed suicide in a cafe he owned in Chicago, Johnson married another white woman. It was no coincidence. But one could question the frame-up he faced. Jack Johnson, being a convicted violator of the White Slavery Act and being sentenced to a year and a day imprisonment, but exiled into Paris with joy, as usual, very grand. It had to be Europe, and they had to have a pet leopard he walked along with, man, drinking champagne with crowds following. Dig this. The fight he lost in 1915 in Havana was rumored to be thrown. Jack Johnson lived. He died the way he lived, in a fast car, 1946 at age 68. The music on this album speaks for itself, but dig the guitar and bass. They are far in. And so is the producer, Tio Macero. He did it again. And that's a quote from Miles Davis. It's one of the few things. He doesn't write a lot on his albums. So some do, but this Jack Johnson album, this is a classic. I also bought he had a complete Jack Johnson set on CD that I picked up. This was there we go. Right side up. But anyway, it's a 4-disc. It's got a lot of the it's obviously got the album on there, but it's got a lot of the outtakes. It's got a song called Willie Nelson on here. It's got another song called Johnny Bratton. It's got a song called Archie Moore. It's got a song called Duran. Miles was the boxer, bro. Miles was a boxing fan. As a matter of fact, Miles exiled himself back in the early 70s. Miles had a coke habit. Miles was, Miles didn't want to hear anybody, didn't want to see anybody. He stayed in his apartment for a year, and Miles was spotted at the first Ali Frazier fight at ringside, and of course, where else is Miles going to go, bro? Anyway, Sharon Marie, thanks for coming in, man. DP Rocker, Jeff Lacerda, man, I appreciate it. We're talking about some jazz in here. Usually I'm the boxing man, but today I'm talking about some jazz. I'm talking about specifically Miles Davis, who to me he was the center of jazz, of classic jazz, of jazz rock fusion. I think we mentioned Bitches Brew in here. Right after Bitches Brew, he put out another album. He put out the Water Babies album, and this was the classic quartet, man. It was Miles the quintet rather. That was Miles Davis with Herbie Hancock, Tony Williams, Ron Carter, and Wayne Shorter, and that was the standard album, the standard quintet of the '60s. if there was any event, man, it was any jazz get together, any major jazz concert or jazz festivals, which is another subject. Miles Davis was the man, and see, I live in Rhode Island. We have the Newport Jazz Festival a half hour away from where I'm sitting, and I've attended many Newport Jazz Festivals. The last original one, I was there, 1971, I believe it was, and there was a riot there. We couldn't get in anymore. They called it the beer riots. Um, Dizzy Gillespie was playing, and a singer called Jackie DeShannon was singing the song "What the World Needs Now Is Love," and there was tear gas, and they closed the show down. As a matter of fact, Led Zeppelin was supposed to take the stage there, but Miles, the day before, this was on a Saturday. Miles, he did the show, and they didn't know if he was going to do it with his acoustic band or his electric band. Well, he did it full bore electric, man. I tell you, some of the jazz purists, they didn't want to hear it, but Miles had everybody there. He had Mclaughlin, he had Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, he had Jack DeJohnette. It was Miles at his finest. If you can ever listen to Miles at Newport, Miles Goes Electric, awesome thing to hear. But anyway, I went there, and I was 18. I was an entrepreneur, man. I brought a grill with me, a bunch of hamburger patties. I was going to make a few bucks, and I was going to see the show, man. And I couldn't get over one of the bridges that connects Newport. Because Newport's an island. Actually, Rhode Island is an island, but there's a lot of smaller island towns, and they're connected by bridges. You couldn't even get over the bridge, and so that was another. It was a sad way, but. Lala D, she knows what I'm talking about. She's from Rhode Island, man. The plant, the plant. My wife just threw that in the back the other day. She said, "Man, you might as well, show some of these." Matt Chad was here last weekend, and he mentioned I kind of live in the jungle because back in the day, man, plants were very very hip in your apartment. They were cool. I loved it, man. Plants take in carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. So they're basically one of your early your air filters, man. They're Mother Nature's air filter. So I always liked walking in a place that had plants. It just had that nice clean smell to it. Just living, green, something you have to water and take care of. But anyway, man, I still have a lot of plants, and this one here, I grabbed this sucker out of a dumpster. I left the bar one night. They were rearranging the bar, and it was only about this high. And I grabbed it, I put it in the car, and I think that was in probably 1990. So this sucker's been living here for about 30 years, man. And it's almost overtaking the place, almost overtaking my house. I think I've had to clip it on top of it, touch the ceiling. But I like it, man. It's got a nice root on there. It's got a good vibe. It's probably going to be my Christmas tree this year. I don't go out and buy a Christmas tree, man. I always decorate one of my big plants, and I've got one over there that I bought when I moved in here that I know is 40 years old. Kind of mind blowing. But anyway, man, jazz plants. I love my jazz. I drink a lot of water over here, man. Water is the key. The plants, that's all they drink, and that's all I drink. That's all my dog drinks. My wife, well, hey, man. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But anywho, man, I'm gonna do another hit on my Toka 2 over here. My arthritis is flaring up a little bit. I need a little more. One more hit over here, so I can finish this show here. Anybody else out there, jazz enthusiasts? You have any favorites that any jazz musicians that you like out there, man? I could Gil Scott-Heron. Yeah, I like Gil Scott-Heron, man. Oh, awesome, man. That song, "We Almost Lost Detroit," that hits home, bro. That's I definitely like Gil Scott-Heron. There's not much music that I don't like, and it's strange, man, because the jazz. I was like a jazz snob for probably 20 years. Excuse me for a second here. By that I mean I didn't listen to anything but jazz. When Donald Byrd, oh, absolutely, Donald Byrd, yeah. One of your best trumpeters around. I've got many Donald Byrd albums in my collection over there. Mr. Pads is asking me about John McLaughlin, Weather Report, Herbie Hancock, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Miles Davis, Chick Corea. They're my favorites too, brother. You know, the thing about jazz is once you start looking at a particular artist, I mean, like Miles Davis, for instance, man, there are so many offshoots. All the musicians that you mentioned, they all have their own bands. They all have their own albums. They tour themselves, but yet they could all go back and jam with Miles. They could put out an album. I mean, these jazz musicians are so talented. The thing that most impressed me about them, and you know, I was living in Boston for a while. Boston was an action spot for jazz. You know, you had the Boston Conservatory of Music. You know, you had Berkeley. It was just a hot spot. You know, these musicians, you know how they made these students, they made their money by putting trios and quintets together. You know, going around and playing in the bands, going on open mic nights. And a lot of these bands, they just Clifford Brown. Oh yeah, I remember Clifford, man. Rest in peace. I remember I don't remember, but I listened to Clifford Brown quite a bit, man. Great trumpet player, and when he passed away with Bud Powell. After playing a gig, man, it was a sad day in jazz. It was like the Buddy Holly, you know, the day the music died. Yeah, Clifford Brown. He would have been one of the best. He was a great trumpet player, man. Bruce, check out a song called "A Jazz Thing" by Avashi Cohen. The thing about the Avashi Cohen, I've heard him before, and I will definitely check it out. But my horizon has just broadened so much on music now. I listen to more than jazz. For a while, like I was saying, man, for 20 years, I was a jazz snob. If I would go to a party, I'd take over the turntable. I'd put jazz on, and I get into arguments with people. They'd say, "Oh, but I want to hear some Stevie Wonder." I'd say, "But dude, check out Miles Davis on this jam. Tell me if you know it would almost be like, you know, so some boxes today have passions. Some fans, not boxers. I'm sorry. Some fans have passions for fighters that are beyond beyond normal. I was like that with music. You know, I'd have to hear jazz, man. I'd go into a club, and I'd get on that jukebox, and I'd pump in a few bucks, and I'd make sure that there was jazz. If they had jazz in there, I'd play them all. One of my best friends who passed away, JR, he just died last summer, man. He was the guy that I used to go to jazz concerts with all the time, and he was a homeboy from Rhode Island. And when I came back from living in Boston and in Maine and in New York, you know, doing my thing on the road, you know, playing, you know, I was immersed in jazz. I was following bands. You know, I tried a little bit of promotion. I was doing disc jockey stints, you know, all night shows. But anyway, man, when I came back home, and I didn't want to do that anymore. My buddy JR was there, and he owned a bar, and he played music in his bar. He was he didn't really have a favorite. He used to play old stuff. He used to play you know, Elvis, and he'd play fucking, you know, Black Sabbath, all kind of crazy shit. Number one grinder. Thank you for coming in, brother. So anyway, man, I started turning him on to jazz. I needed a place to go. He had an apartment above the bar. It was a 2-bedroom. He was living in one. I said, "Hey, Jay, can you rent me?" Yeah. So anyways, man, I moved in there, and I probably had a few hundred jazz albums at the time. Moved him up there, and I was playing, and he started digging the jazz. And I was like, check out the guitar player on that, on even like a Jimmy Page. Check out Jimmy Page's guitar speed against George Benson's. Anyway, man, his mind was blown. We'd get into a blues venue, somebody like Joe Beck, a jazz blues guitar player. I'd say, check this guy out, and man, he just started to turn my way. And you know, he'd start tending bar from 4:00 till about 1, and then he'd go in there and he'd put jazz on. The customers like, "What the fuck are you?" Pretty soon it got to be the norm, and his little bar down there got to be known as a little jazz jazz hangout. People would go in there and they dig the jazz, and I even tried my luck. I opened up a little club down the street. It didn't last too long because jazz wasn't that popular. It had a niche, very 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 niche audience. But anyway, man, shout out to my brother J.R. He passed away the same day Marvin Hagler did, man. And J.R. He was the kind of a guy where I knew what was going on in the jazz world. J.R. was he was my guy. I'd say, hey Jay, man, there's a concert up in Providence today. Chick Corea's doing. Excuse me, Keith Jarrett, awesome piano player. He used to go and he did a solo concert, just him on piano. It was awesome. It was jazz. It was classical. It was a mind-blowing night. And me and JR were there. We were front row. And like I was saying before, when you get into that music, you can close your eyes and you go you go anywhere. Like what we're listening to right now, I think it might be Sketches of Spain. It's a Miles album. I don't know because I'm doing some background stuff and it's sounding good. It's on YouTube. It's just it's a window and it is what it is, man. But anyway, man, I think my mind went blank for a second. What was I just talking about? Jazz, JR's Jazz Club, Andy's Bar. When he went in at 4:00, a lot of people had a frown on their face, but then again, a lot of them had a smile on their face because they knew he was coming down. And this was the days of vinyl, so he'd have a record player behind the bar. He brought his speakers in, put them up around the place. It wasn't a professional setup, but bro, he had some awesome sounds in there. And but by 7:00, the place would be. He'd be cranking jazz in there. He'd be playing stuff like Stan Getz, and he'd be playing Billy Cobham. He'd be playing all kind of different generational jazz pieces. We go from some jazz fusion, from some Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters, and then he'd go down and be playing some Charlie Parker and some Count Basie sometimes. Just crazy stuff. Loose goes. Do you think Thelonious Monk is the best jazz pianist ever? He's one of the greatest. Jazz, it's like boxing. I can't say who's the greatest ever because, man, every time I see somebody do something great, I'll go look at another jazz artist and they'll do something great or greater. I don't know, man. To me, the greats are in a league by themselves. Thelonious Monk, some people will listen to Thelonious Monk and listen to his, he plays these chords that some people will think they're a mistake. They'll think he made a mistake. Thelonious Monk he's a character, man, always dressed in Salvation Army clothes, man. He was a character. He'd have the sweaters down, the sweater sleeves down to the middle of the palms of his hands. Awesome piano player. Thelonious Monk. Some people say it was hard to play with. Some people he couldn't play with. Other people he could. But he's one of the greats, man. No doubt about it. Anybody who listens to jazz, who likes to listen to some good instrumental stuff, check out a Thelonious Monk album, and you're gonna see the difference between like a Thelonious Monk and a Bud Powell, or or a Herbie Hancock, or even a Chick Corea. Thelonious Monk had that. He would bang on those keys, almost like a percussionist, and he'd make sounds on that piano, but he was unbelievable. I mean, like I said, man, some people couldn't play with Thelonious Monk, some people couldn't play without him. John Schofield, John Schofield. I caught John Schofield a couple of times, man. There's a club in Boston. It's called the Jazz Workshop, and it's got another. It's two clubs in one. It's called the Jazz Workshop in Paul's Mall, and I saw George Duke play there one night. In fact, 2 nights. I was in Rhode Island. I made the trip twice because I had front row seats. It was great. I knew somebody at Paul's Mall, and they made sure I got seats for that concert. And John Schofield played guitar with George Duke, and Alphonse Mouzon, old Weather Report player, on bass. Oh man, it was an awesome concert. Who the hell was the drummer there? No, Alphonse Mouzon was the drummer. I'm sorry. The bass player was a guy named Daryl. He played with the Rolling Stones too. Darryl Jones. Here we go. So many names on there, and the thing is, it's like boxing. Sometimes the names they kind of they slip your head, but they're right there, and you know exactly who we're talking about. And then all of a sudden, boop! Come on, kid. There's the name. You'll spit it out there. But yeah, John Schofield, man. There's just so many names in the glorious jazz world. And Miles Davis, man. I have so many albums by Miles, man. I've got Miles. He played at the Black Hawk in San Francisco. This is probably early '50s, man. This is with a classic band. This is when he played with Hank Mobley on tenor sax. This is the West Coast Miles. Wynton Kelly, awesome jazz piano player, man. Paul Chambers on bass, who's played with everybody in jazz, and Jimmy Cobb on the drums, man. This is sometimes it's hard to find dates in here, but just by knowing this quintet, this was late '50s. Then this is another classic, man. My Funny Valentine. This is the quartet I was telling all you cats about earlier. The quintet. I keep saying quartet, but Miles called it his quartet. It was a quintet. Miles the front man, but this one he had a different sax player. He had George Coleman. He had Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams. George Coleman, he's another great tenor sax player. I don't know how he got on the My Funny Valentine album, but it's weird because I was bopping around Providence one night, and there's a place called Allery's. It's a little bar. It's down an alley, and the stage there has couches and soft chairs. It's very, very comfortable. Very dark bar, very comfortable. If you weren't looking for it, you'd pass it right by. But I heard George Coleman was playing there, and they had a house trio, and that's the thing about jazz musicians. See, a good jazz player. He can go on tour. He doesn't need a band to go on tour. If he tours jazz clubs, most jazz clubs have a house band, and most of those house bands are awesome musicians. They're professionals. They're PhDs or higher in the music world. And anyway, George Coleman was at this club Allery's, and they had a trio. It was the Paul Schmeling trio. They backed up different headliners that came in there. A guy named Adi Cabral on drums, Paul Schmeling on piano, and the bass player I can't think of. I can see him in front of me. They had Kenny Grady sometimes, but there was another bass player who played with him all the time. Anyway, George Coleman from Miles Davis's band was there. He fronted. He was great. The Paul Schmeling trio backed him up. I was in the front row on a couch, sipping on some Cavazier. I think I was even smoking a joint. I had a cigar in the hand, and I was cupping a bone in my smoky atmosphere. It was the good old days. Nobody really gave a shit. It was an after-hours club, and George Coleman. It was another one of those. You close your eyes, you start bopping, and you could take me back anywhere. It was an awesome night, man. And once again, the roots are with Miles Davis. Miles is the man. I think this is one of the last albums that he put out, Decoy. This was in the whining years of Miles Davis. This is a total fusion album. If you listen to In a Funny Valentine and listen to this one, he's got Darryl Jones on here. He's got John Schofield, Al Foster. He's got a lot of the newer musicians, because what Miles did was Miles would play with somebody until the spirit didn't move him anymore, and then he'd recruit other musicians to play with him. And Miles, if you played with Miles, you were something else. When I was living in Boston, and I was hanging out with some Berkeley cats, and there's a guitar player there. His name was Mike Stern, and he was awesome, but he never went to classes. And I said, what's up with this dude? He just kind of hangs out in his room playing guitar. He said, well, all he has to do is finish Berkeley, and he's going on tour with Miles Davis. Wow. So anyway, I talked to him a little bit. He explained the situation, how he was a musician. His parents wanted him to go to Berkeley and graduate. His father graduated, and anyway, he hung there for a few years. I don't know if he ever graduated, but sure enough, he went on tour with Miles, and he's got some of his own albums out. I've listened to him. Mike Stern, great guitar player, nice guy. You know, all these musicians. I mean, this is how we would support them in the day. You know, we used to get these albums, man. They were, I don't even remember how much they were. You know, I think they started off at about $4, then $8, and on and on, and then the advent of CDs, and the sound of CDs. These are all Miles Davis CDs. Like I said earlier, man, the guy's got he's got 61 studio albums out and 46 collaborations and 39 lives. And I just grabbed them. I grabbed as many as I could. And this was, at the time there was no we didn't have our iPhones, man. We couldn't just punch in Miles Davis and go for a walk and hear every Miles tune that's ever been recorded. Like it is now. It's we're living in a great world, man. Technology is where it's at. But anywho, man, this CD was a tribute to Miles Davis, put out after his death, and it's got the songs on it. So What, RJ, Little One, Elegy, All Blues, 81, and it's got the classic quartet on there. But then to play in Miles' place, he's got a trumpet player, Wallace Rooney, and he's. I'm not going to say new generation now because there are more generations. Queen of God, thank you for coming in, brother. Love Miles, man. Who can't love Miles? Miles is so complex that Miles has styles for everybody. Miles the boxer, Miles the fighter, Miles the thinker, Miles the runner. Miles Davis has so many different titles for his albums. Steaming with Miles Quintet. Miles on the Corner. I mean, he had just some great names for his albums. Aurora. This is one of the last albums, another one of the last albums that he put out on CD. And Miles said, "I think it's a masterpiece. I really do." And this is, I'm sure I have this one on vinyl too. It's another one that I bought so I could pop it in the car when I was driving around and shit. And anyway, man, Miles Davis was the man as far as I was concerned. I could go on and I could go blabbering about Miles Davis, but if anybody here is a Miles fan, if they want to come on and talk a little bit about Miles, I'm into that. I think I've been doing my thing for almost an hour up here, going back and forth. So if anybody out there is a jazz enthusiast, man, please share some of your experiences up here. Let me know what you think of jazz, and maybe we can carry this on for a little while longer here because I could talk about jazz all day, but I guess that's not really what it's about. I like to hear other people's views. I like to hear what you're saying out there. Anybody has any experiences with some good jazz concerts that they've seen, or anyone can talk about Miles Davis, or anything in the jazz realm. That's what I'm doing over here today, man. Jazz is the thing, man, and nobody wants to talk about jazz in my circle, man. They're all older, and I don't know. It was this was back in the day, back in the 80s, the 70s. The jazz spirit was really it was totally, it encompassed my life. And I spoke on it before. I was a musician. I played drums. I played guitar. I played trumpet, piano. But I realized my limitations when I get into jazz. These guys were so talented. I mean, they could read music and follow music. I was fortunate enough because I've been involved in music all my life. When I was a kid, when I was in fourth grade, my mother used to force me to take piano lessons, man. So, I could dig her out of the grave and hug her for that. I'll hug her when I'm in heaven. But man, that was one of the greatest things in my life. I hated to go. All my friends are playing baseball, football, hanging out. Fourth grade, man, I got to go to piano lessons after school with Mrs. Garcia. And did I study my lessons for the week? No. Did I practice? No. But I bullshitted her, and I learned how to read music. I got my basics there, but I never appreciated it. And then I went on and I played in the high school band. I learned how to play trumpet and the baritone. But my love for the music wasn't there. I went through the motions. I just did it because it was something to do in school. And I was always into drumming. My sister actually had a set of drums, and somehow I talked her out of them. I took them with me to my place, and I get into playing drums. I played with a few bands, and I was into the jazz when I got the drums, so I could I could follow jazz. I could keep up with it. I could read music, and I was digging it. But then once again, I saw my limitations, and and also I also had a family that was starting, and I couldn't keep the drum set up anymore. I lost my studio. But regardless thereof, I still just, Remy, salute. Thanks for coming on here, brother. I never lost my love for music, for jazz, for any of the arts out there, as far as music goes. Music and boxing hand in hand. But anyway, man, jazz. It was the ultimate music. I was comparing my own playing to the jazz musicians. Where I was a three chord guitar player. Maybe a few more, but I would basically play. I do covers of Dylan songs, Stone songs, whatever it could be. I had my own style. I'd play some Tom Waits, and I used my gravelly. But anyway, I used to play happy hours. I had some local clubs that would give me chances to play. But I just was. I realized how limited I was, and I didn't take myself seriously, because I used to hang with jazz people. I was comparing my life to I was comparing my musical ability to the best, and it was far from that, man. So anyway, I kind of put my own musical career on hold, and it got to be follow the jazz people. I would just jazz just so controlled and so out of control. I don't know if you can dig that, man, but yeah, man, that's jazz. I love jazz. I used to go to clubs every night that I could. I'd close clubs down. Some of the best times I had were after hours. Hanging out with some of the musicians, having some of the musicians jamming. I mean, I went to a concert at Lupo's Heartbreak Hotel in Providence, which was it's a big place for music. A lot of top musicians played there, but they'd sneak a jazz musician in there once in a while. And they had Jaco Pastorius, bass player from Weather Report. It was just him and a drummer, and the music wasn't that great because Jaco was out of it. This was actually a month before he was murdered. He was killed, and I could see why, because he had a big mouth. He was very aggressive, very drunk, very small, but Jaco was an awesome bass player, probably one of the greatest bass players, electric bass players of all time. Played with Weather Report, played with played with many people. His own albums. I played with Sam and Dave. I mean, Jaco could play with everybody. Played with John McLaughlin. But anyway, it was the after show at Lupo's. I knew Rich Lupo. We went in the back. We were partying. Jaco was back there. He was drinking Jack Daniels, and Pat Metheny came in. And Pat Metheny's a guitar player who's out of Boston. Awesome guitar player. Played guitar for Gary Burton. He's played with everybody. He played with Joni Mitchell. He's toured with Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock. He's an awesome guitar player with his own style. But anyway, he was in there, and he knew Pat Metheny. They put out an album years before, and Pat had his guitar. They were jamming back there, and it was like, man, before cell phones. A cassette tape recorder was this big unless you were a 007 or something. But anyway, man, I took that in, and that was like that's some of the best jazz music. When after hours jam sessions, and these guys are doing lines of coke, and the place was full of weed. Everybody could have any drink they wanted. I don't know if Rich Lupo recorded this, but it was just great. There's another bar in East Providence. It's called Bovie's. and they used to have Monday night. There was a cat, is a drummer. This guy played back in the swing era. Probably played with Charlie Parker. His name was Duke Belair. Duke Belair's big band. And Monday nights, it's an off night for jazz musicians. Most places. So from all over New England, they'd come to Bovie's to play with the Duke Belair. He had a big band, probably 16, 17 musicians in there. And he'd get musicians from New York City who would play like with Doc Sevens. They'd be in Paul Williams, the Tonight Show orchestra, and David Letterman's band. And they'd come to this club in Providence to jam with Duke Belair's band. And man, it was like Will Lee, the bass player, who's played with everybody, who's played with Paul Williams on the Dave Letterman band. I saw him in there one night. I saw a percussionist, the name's slipping, Ralph McDonald, great percussionist. He had congos, he had a lot of different tambourines and shakers and bells. But anyway, it was a place for serious musicians to come. It was truly, Dimitar, all stars, definitely all stars. But it was I think there was maybe a $2 cover charge, and the musicians just went there. It's almost like they went there to take a bath, to be cleansed. They get on these awesome solos. There was a trumpet player. His name was Paul Phillips. He played in New York. He'd come on there with a cornet and a trumpet. He'd play both of them at the same time, his mouth, and he'd be doing different, not the same notes. He'd be doing it was crazy times. Talented, friendly people. But these are just some of the memories I have from early jazz, man. From my 20 years in jazz. I could go on and on here. I don't know how long I've spent with you on here. I spent close to an hour. Yeah, we've been on here for an hour. I could bullshit you forever on here. We talk jazz. If nobody wants to come up here and talk a little bit, man, I'm going to close it up. I had an hour. I thought it was a good show, man. I appreciate everybody coming up here to see me, man. If anybody wants to share some of their jazz experiences, man. Yeah, Bill Evans on piano, and then there's another Bill Evans who plays the saxophone and plays reeds. So it's a weird thing because you can pick up one of these late Miles Davis albums, these albums that came out in the 80s, and I know Bill Evans is on there, and not the Bill Evans that we're talking about. The Bill Evans. There's the original Bill Evans, the piano player, great piano player, and then there's Bill Evans right here, soprano sax, who's playing on this Miles Davis album called "The Man with the Horn." This was released in the late '80s. This is like I was saying earlier, when Miles just didn't want to play with the old classic players anymore. He wanted to move on. There was one concert that I saw the CD of, and Miles didn't even look at the audience. He looked at his band while he was playing the concert, and and it wasn't. People thought he was pissed at the audience, man. They thought he was, they had all kind of interpretations of it. But the thing is, Miles would look at his musicians, and they could look back at Miles, and if they were playing the right thing, man, they would, they would continue. Miles smiled. Miles would give a little grin. But if they were off and they caught that eye of Miles, man, I don't know what that feeling must have been like. But daggers, I mean, look out. But anyway, man, I'm going to get off here, man. I thank everybody for coming on here, man. I think I shouted you all out. And anybody that I forgot to shout out, man, 1,000 pardons. This is Bruce Goes, man. I was just talking a little jazz here with you, man. Thank you so much for coming on here, man. We're gonna do a lot of different topics on my show here, because I was on Everything Boxing last night. I stopped in to say hello, listen to him for a little bit. Keon says, Bruce Goes, man, we're gonna talk some professional wrestling on your show, man. I saw it the other day, and I know you're wrestling, dude. Keon, yeah, brother. We're going to talk wrestling on here, man, because I think I mentioned I've probably been to over 100 live wrestling matches. So we're gonna do wrestling. We're gonna talk my passion, nutrition, health, weight training. You know, this stuff I talk about with my brother Big Duke on the fourth quarter, because that's a subject we can't dismiss that one, because, you know, if we're not healthy, you know, if we're not feeling good, and, you know, we're not going to be around. And, bro, man, you know, yesterday I got my flu shot in this arm. I got my COVID booster in this arm. I'm fucking bionic today, man. And I woke up, I feel healthy. My wife feels healthy. We're smoking, we're toking, we're listening to jazz. We're talking to all you cats out there. But anyway, man, you know, mad love. This is Bruce Goes. Thank you so much for coming in here, man. I'm out of here, man. Peace.